Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Police Accountability Show. Remember, when you watch the Police Accountability Show, you agree to being offended, as well as nothing that you see on the Police Accountability Show constitutes legal advice. Please reach out to your local lawyers for your local laws. And welcome, everyone. Welcome to another Police Accountability Show. I'm your host, Chad Christophers, and our topic today, decriminalization or the war on drugs. That's right, everyone. We're at war with ourselves. The war on drugs is the war on us. And why? Because at some point, whether you like it or not, everyone in our society actually does take these drugs. These drugs, these street drugs that we're talking about decriminalizing, are actually the same drugs, just in a synthetic form that they prescribe in every pharmacy and every place around, right? So we all take cocaine as codeine. We take opiates, our heroin. And we have never come out with another painkiller. All of the other drugs are designer drugs that were actually designed for the military. See, understanding the history of drugs will help. Drugs have only been criminal for I don't know, like 75. It is very new for these drugs to be criminalized. You used to be able to go to your corner store and you could buy cocaine, you could buy heroin from your local shopkeeper. It was something normal, everyday people could do as much as they wanted. And in fact, some of our famous characters, we're on things like that. So it's something new. And how is the war on drugs the war on people? Well, first of all, and the biggest problem of the war on drugs is the unsafe drug supply that we have circulating through our neighborhoods, right? There are painkillers people get addicted to, such as cocaine, heroin, meth. I don't know if I'm saying the same ones. I'll be honest with you here. I know things about the drugs. I've read things about them, but I'm definitely not a drug expert per se. But there's a lot like Special K, I think. There's acids. There's all sorts of drugs out there. And there's the original forms or the plain form of drugs, such as cocaine, which comes from the plant. But then we also have the ones that pharmacies have, such as codeine and Tylenol 3 would be an example of codeine, and all the Percocet. Well, that's actually derived from opiates or heroin, the same thing opium comes from. So, and how the war on drug is a war on us, and why having these unregulated drugs circulate in our streets means they're getting mixed with chemicals. They're being transported in unusual ways into our country, and that's getting them laced with dangerous chemicals and drugs, as well as the people here are they're not legit pharmacists. These are guys that are just making guesses with chemicals and then experimenting on people, which is really dangerous. People don't realize this, but a lot of the junkies that you see out there, people that have lost motor control and are twitching on the street, they've caused themselves major brain damage to be there. But what causes a lot of these junkies to be so damaged like this isn't actually the pure form of cocaine, isn't actually the pure form or codeine. It's actually when those drugs get mixed with other chemicals to make the drug dealer more money. One of the big examples of that right now that's killing a lot of people is fentanyl. Because fentanyl being so powerful, and that's the problem, our drugs are getting more and more powerful, and they're out there on the street, and they're not in their clean forms. They're not, and people are overdosing, people are doing, you know what I mean? And this is what's causing the damage. So these drugs are damaging, and then how does that affect us? Well, the people who are on these drugs, they can't work, and they need a lot of money to support these drug supplies. So how do they get the money? Well, unfortunately, a lot of them are stealing for it, dealing drugs themselves, being prostitutes. It's terrible what these people end up doing for drugs. And that's what affects the rest of us, because, people are breaking into our houses to rob us. People are stealing our identities. A lot of these crimes are driven by junkies just trying to get their fix. And that's where our society, it's costing our society a fortune paying for these drugs. And where does all this money go? It doesn't go into treatment. It doesn't go to the Canadian people or back to the people. It goes to criminal organizations, which then use it to commit other crimes. Such as, I'll give you an example. There's one major crime group here in Canada that actually used the proceeds of crimes, and this was in the paper, to start a call center, for which then used the call center to defraud elderly people in Florida out of, I think it was like $100 or $150 million. Absolutely disgusting. So not only are we making all these people rob us just to support their drug habits, they're giving these criminal gangs this money, which in then in turn are committing more crimes against us, right? As well as it drives up drug prices, meaning that people have to steal more and commit more crimes, because these people on drugs, they don't have jobs, a lot of them. A lot of these people can't hold down jobs. So where are they getting the money for this? So that's where the war on drugs is the war on us, right? Because irregardless of where you are, even if you don't do drugs in any way and you don't even know anyone who does them, your workplace is a victim of fraud or theft because of drugs. Your friends or family are victims because of drugs, right? And then you have high functioning junkies. What's a high functioning? There's low functioning junkies, and then there's high functioning junkies. Well, a low functioning junkie is someone that you see on the street that has lost motor control, that can no longer control themselves. But then there are a lot of junkies out there that you can't tell are junkies, right? A lot of people that seem just like me and you. They look proper, they've done themselves up, they look like they got their stuff together, their houses are clean, but they're not fully functioning. Some of these people will seem okay, but when you really look at their lives, you'll find out that they're not functioning completely. They're not working, they're doing other things in their lives. They don't have very good jobs, they're not getting educated, they're not doing things with their lives. So, and we can't tell who these junkies are. And they're also out there committing crimes every single day. And I don't know, and you can't really tell who they are. And another drug that is terrible, and that's where we need to move, I believe we need to move all of our drugs from criminal, all of the criminal drugs, and we need to put them in the mental health system where they should have been in the first place. And to be honest with you, the interesting point about that is, even here in Canada, the same place you go for drug rehab is the same place that you go for mental health rehab. Why? Because they simply can't tell the difference between someone who's chosen to take drugs, someone who's being drugged, and someone who has a mental health problem. So they're all put in the same place, right? So you can't kind of tell the difference between them. It's really hard sometimes what is what. And the worst part is they don't fully understand. Our doctors don't fully understand how our brains and bodies work. So a lot of the time, these guys are just making an educated guess. And I don't care much for educated guesses. I don't know about you. So that's where, as a society, we need to decriminalize these drugs, and we need to put them under the mental health system, and we need to include alcohol and other drugs that should actually be, because honestly, alcohol can be very much worse than a lot of those chemical drugs. Why? They create a lot more high functioning junkies, or junkies that you can't tell are junkies. They'll have jobs, some of them still have careers, but they're so brain damaged that they're not operating at full capacity, and they're not capable of it. And as well as they're usually not able to hold down jobs as much, or they don't get promoted, they're not getting educated, and they commit crimes too. And these people are harder to see in our society. And we need to spend more time identifying these people in our society so we can help the alcoholics as well. Because it is a bigger problem than people realize. There's a reason why they had prohibition in the past. The problem with it is people are still going to want to get these drugs irregardless and do them what we want to do. And my belief, and what I believe we should do, is take all of the drugs all of them that cause us damage. We should put them under our mental health system, and we should have to go to doctors to prescribe them. And why? For a multitude of reasons. One, a clean drug supply. Doctors, pharmacies, they can ensure a lot cleaner drug supply. They can ensure that people aren't doing too much of the drugs, right? The money from the drugs, and we can lower the price, then goes back to our doctors. And those guys are desperate for money, trying to pay for their overpriced educations, and because a lot of them just become doctors because they want to be rich. So that would give us a considerable more money to pay these doctors, which would be great in that regard, as well as now we can use the money that these doctors are making, a portion of it, to then treat the people who have these drug problems. So creating a system where they don't have to steal, creating a system where we may be able to have people do these drugs and still be able to function and contribute in our society. Because that's the problem. Not only do these people with these drug problems, they stop contributing, so they're not making or creating anything or making money in our society, but also they're stealing and destroying everyone else's work, right? So that's where those things will stop. These criminal gangs and criminal organizations won't have a quick, fast way to make money anymore. It'll take it out of their hands. Now, I'm not saying that those guys can't still be involved in drugs, but I do believe that it should be under the mental health system, under that system. Maybe the guys or the gangsters that control the drug trade now, well, maybe they could be hired to protect the new drug line, so to speak, because that would be advantageous for all of us. Not only would our society get the money, we'd have less junkies in our streets. We'd have more money. We could charge less for the drugs, but also they would be more effective. We can be sure that people aren't going to die. This is something that people do. This is part of our society, and us refusing to accept it and calling the people bad and criminal and everything else is not helping us. We've had the war on drugs for many years now, and I have not seen a benefit from what I read before the drugs were actually criminalized, except there's probably a lot more junkies in our streets from bad drug supplies. So that's where we need to decriminalize our drugs, and we need to move them to our mental health system, not just to get clean drug supplies to our citizens that are going to do these drugs anyways, but so that the money starts going back. It's no different than what they did with cigarettes. What they did with cigarettes was they looked up here in Canada, they looked up how much Health Canada spends a year, the estimated amount that they spend a year on health problems associated with cigarettes. Then what they did is they added a tax on cigarettes to counter the amount of money we're spending, right? And why shouldn't that be done with all of the criminal drugs, right? They're doing them. There's billions and billions of dollars there that are going to criminal organizations that are being used to rob us in other ways, when they could be going back to the Canadian people. They could be going back into our medical system to help Canadians, right? And it takes money from these gangs, as well as there's another point that you may not take into account. Having these drugs criminalized, criminals target kids in schools, right? That would also take that away, because there would be no point in doing it, because they wouldn't make enough money selling the drugs, right? If our doctors start to offer them at better prices than the street, and they're a clean supply, well, that's going to win. All we have to do is keep our drug supply cheaper than the street, and that'll keep it that way. And then what we do with the money we're making, well, if you do those drugs, you go through treatment programs. Now, unfortunately, not everyone's going to want to be part of the system, but it would definitely take a significant load off our system, as well as also significantly, and you don't realize this, help our homeless. Now, I have had the unfortunate circumstance of being homeless in my life. I'm not going to explain the circumstances surrounding it. When I was a little kid, I was made homeless, and I've spent time in the street. I've lived in the street in suburbs. I've lived in the street in the city, and not for long periods of time, a few months, not for years. I was homeless a few times for a number of months. Right? And it sucks out there. So I do have experience. And when I was trying to get off the street, it was very difficult because the entire system is also got a lot of people with drug problems who are trying to pretend they want to get better and off the street to gain access to the resources. So I was basically out there competing with people who didn't actually want to get off the street. Now I managed to get off the street and get a job, and obviously things are going much better. That's life, right? But there's a lot of people that don't and can't, right? So, and that's a big problem for our society, is having these druggies out there, as well as street beggars, street crimes. It creates a lot more problems in our society. Now, I do get the other side of it. These drugs, having them seem like they're okay, because people seem to think alcohol is okay because it's legal, and it's really not, right? Alcohol is really not okay. If you read how much damage it does to your body and your brain, if you drink every day, you are causing yourself serious brain damage. I advise you, if you see this, to look up. If you drink every day, please stop. Okay? Alcohol is meant to be enjoyed, not lived on. Okay? And that's the problem, right? People see these drugs, and that's the excuse I've heard. Well, people think they're okay. Well, then let's not make them legal like alcohol, but let's put them under the mental health system. And we should take alcohol and we should put it there too. So people who are drinking do receive support for alcoholism, and we should be using the money from alcohol to treat the people with alcoholism. That would be nothing but beneficial for our society. And then the extra money that we make is more money for the Canadian people, is more money we can give these doctors. So we would also then be able to afford a lot more health care. Think about that for yourself. Instead of funding big criminal gangs, we're funding a ton of doctors, right? Because that's another big problem in our society, is doctors don't really fully understand how our brains and bodies work. And from the studies I've read overall, now this doesn't speak to every doctor, but overall, all doctors have only a 50% diagnosis rate, right? So having a lack of doctors in our country, we need second opinions. There's a reason why they have second opinions, and that's why, right? So a lot of the time, our economies are spending a lot of money on unnecessary treatments, and not even because doctors are purposely misdiagnosing people. They're accidentally misdiagnosing people and treating people for things that they don't even have. So bringing this money back into our society and greatly increasing our supply of doctors would greatly help us all. So, guys, support decriminalization. Take all the drugs, put them under the mental health system, support it. Tell your politicians. And this goes back to police accountability, because why? The obvious reason. Because police end up dealing with these people most of all, right? And the police, how do you deal with someone who's wasted out of their skull, who's out of control? It's very difficult, right? So that's where decriminalization will also take a lot out of our police work, out of our jails, right? Because we have people who are just sick who are in jail, and it will never, ever help them, because jail doesn't help junkies. It just doesn't. The very principle of it doesn't. In fact, they usually end up doing more drugs, being there, worse drugs, and getting more messed up. And they get more connections to get more drugs. So, in my opinion, that system isn't working. So, as a people, we need to support police accountability. Contact your local politicians and tell them, we need not just to decriminalize, but we need to put our drugs under the mental health system. We need to stop the war on drugs. We need to stop the war on us. Tell me what you think in the comments. Should we decriminalize? Am I way off base here? Do you want to keep funding criminal gangs? What do you think? Decriminalize, not decriminalize. Is it a war on us? Is it not a war on us? Tell me what you think down in the comments. My name is Chad Christophers. This is the Police Accountability Show. Don't work too hard.